welcome to the Commercial Print Day for the Future Print Virtual Summit. This is a really exciting session brought to us by our friends in Canada. These are all experts and print professionals in their own right, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say today. To give you a little bit of an overview of this session, the key question that frames it is it possible to be successful in commercial print today? In this session, our panel will discuss how leading Canadian commercial print companies from one coast to the other and in between are dealing with the pressures of the market before, during, and after the latest industry challenge. I mean, commercial print touches most areas of our lives, yet the industry struggles and print companies respond with different strategies. Today, I am very proud to welcome and introduce Christian Knapp, Managing Director of CMD Insight, who is joined to discuss this key question by James Barbieri, President of PDI Inc. in Montreal, Quebec, Richard Knuven, President of Hemlock Printers from Vancouver, BC, and Christine Yardley, President of Print Panther in Toronto, Ontario. So, without further ado, over to you, Christian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brendan, and good morning, all. It's day 5 of the Future Print Summit, and yes, it is on commercial printing. My name is Christian Knapp, as Brendan already said, and I've got the pleasure of hosting this session today. A little bit about my background. I've got pretty much an analog background, both in Germany and in the UK, and here in digital in Canada, where I've lived for the last 6 years. And I am joined today by leading printing companies here in Canada from one coast to the other. We've got Jamie in Montreal, we've got Christine here with me in Toronto, and we have Richard out in beautiful Vancouver. So, why and what do we do about commercial printing? What I thought recently, and I don't know if you can see this, I read a book by Steven Schwarzkopf, who is the chairman and CEO and founder of Blackstone. And what I liked about him was the title, What Does It Take? And this is, I guess, the session what applies to all of us in commercial printing. So Jamie, maybe I'll start with you. What do you think it takes to be successful in commercial printing from a PBI perspective?
I think it takes a lot of patience.
We have none of that.
I mean, if you were to tell someone you were getting into commercial printing today, I think you'd get a really blank stare, because a lot of people, you said it before, have this this feeling that print has gone away, and in fact, it's forever present, in almost everything we do every day. Of course, given the last 20 years of transition through the industry, we saw a lot of emphasis put on digital alternatives to printing paper. And in a lot of cases, this was substantiated or justified by the means of the environment. But, if you were to look around at how many iPhones, or cell phones or the like end up going into the garbage, I'd really question that thought process. What does it take to be in commercial printing today? I think you need to really, really have a good overview of where your product is being used, consumed, and how it's bought. It's not only about putting ink on paper. It's about how customers actually procure the product, what they do with it, what is the intention of that product, where does it go? And I think it's our job as printers, and it has been for the last 10 years at least, and through diversification strategies, to wrap yourself around that customer as much as you can, because the value add that goes on to the product after it is produced is as interesting in terms of margin and in terms of protecting your investment as actually producing the product. So I think diversification is probably the key to staying alive. And of course, cost control, all the good business stuff that you can do, I think is critical now. You need to have that. And we're living it through COVID. Those who are able to adjust, adapt, and quickly are going to survive.
And there are lots of examples of that. I mean, I'll pass that question to, well, maybe Christine, you can help us a little bit with what you've been doing. You've done a lot of creative stuff, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, I think, a key thing that Jamie said was that you have to adapt quickly. And I think, we became very efficient very quickly, and we're smaller. So we were able to kind of focus and kind of solely try to do our expert things that we do best. But having said that, we went through this little cycle where, becoming efficient, you were almost inefficient. So it is kind of a sweet spot that you have to figure out as you go. And we had just got into the large format arena when the pandemic hit. And obviously it's a very underutilized area in our shop where we're more of an embellishment shop. But, what we did was we got a few strategic partnerships with other people that maybe didn't have as good a machine as we had, that, didn't have a flatbed maybe, but they had the finishing end. So we really quickly kind of got some alliances going strategically for large format. But honestly, I just think it's, it's a bit of luck and it's a bit of hard work. And, I think we truly are all in this together. So that's kind of how we've survived so far.
I remember you and I talking about this, and you said something that really struck home with me. You said, feel the fear, but act on courage. I really like that because you have been fairly courageous.
Well, that's fear. Fate favors the fearless. That's my motto.
Oh, well, there you go. Richard, what was your experience? What did you guys do? I mean, you've done a lot of growth over the last 8 years.
Yeah, I think just building on the comments from Christine and Jamie, I think for starters, you still need the fundamentals. You need the business needs to have, a printing company still needs to have very good, structural, a structure in place that is key to success in past years and different times. So, in our case, being a regional provider in the West Coast, but also exporting to the U.S., we've done well through some difficult economic times. First and foremost is because we have a very good sales organization. We have good representation. We have people that are knowledgeable and they represent our company well in a number of different markets. So that if you don't have that, a good sort of sales organization, it's going to obviously be hard to bring the business in. We also, through the years have maintained a good service team and a good technical team, on our equipment and, various technologies. So that's sort of fundamental. And then of course companies that succeed have to reinvest. If you don't invest in new technology, you really are going to get left behind. I know that that's sort of an old adage in our industry, but it is true. It has been true for a long time. If you look at the efficiencies on new equipment, we put in a perfect binder and new presses, new folders. This is why our business is a little crazy still sometimes, is the need to reinvest just never ends. So we've sort of stayed the course on that. But then if I look at our success in the last 10 years, kind of to what Jamie was saying, you need to do more for your clients. So we've spent a lot of time on our IT and workflow side and really focused on online solutions for some of our larger clients so they can order and check their job status and check their inventory counts and, sort of getting into that full service side. And some of our biggest growth areas and our largest customers are those that are using a much more sophisticated tools than what would have previously been an email or a phone call to take an order and 2-3 days to get a quote and that kind of thing. So I think you still need the fundamentals, but you have to be very nimble on the technology side in order to build that loyalty and to kind of get those some of those key clients that are key to your long-term success.
You mentioned something very interesting that was about your sales staff being fairly involved. In the UK, there's a lot of discussion about whether really salespeople are still required or print should really be moving online in terms of the internet. And printing companies should be much more open to business from customers direct on their web pages. Is that something you see at all, or are you geographically well positioned with your salespeople to look after your clients?
I think your salespeople need to be adept to selling those online tools. So it doesn't mean you're selling the tools that make you obsolete. I don't think that's the case. I think it's the sales, the person-to-person relationship is still absolutely critical. You can't say, okay, we're gonna now move on to that next generation, and we don't need salespeople anymore. I think that's a very flawed way to look at it, and we certainly see salespeople as absolutely critical, just as they always have been, to stable sales and growth in our sales. They just basically have to be able to sell different tools and solutions they did before.
I know that in BC, sustainability is a big topic, and I know that it is a big topic for you as well. Has that actually helped you when you were trying to promote your company and your products?
Definitely, yeah. So a lot of our clients are looking for those, for information on how to lower their environmental footprint. And so we've tried to make it so that the things we're doing are something that can help the client sort of promote their product in a better way, or so, putting labels on the product or being able to sell it within their organization. So it helps also justify the print spend in some cases, that they're doing it in an environmental way, because that's often used as a way to say, oh, let's get off of print because it's bad for the environment. And that isn't necessarily the case. So yeah, I think that's also part of the equation. And again, it's something that you want to give to your sales team as a tool in their arsenal, because it's not always going to be, relevant depending on the client. But especially large companies are getting more sophisticated in how they're buying. They want sustainability to be part of that. So it's a really important part of the equation in our world.
I'm using a few slides here. The one that I wanted to use next is this one here. I mean, how can you be successful? If I look at the industry itself, and I look at the worldwide industry, the slide here shows that well, of annual revenues of something like 900 billion. This is by Smithers Pyra. The argument is that about 30%, or just about 33% actually, pertain to the commercial segment. And there are lots of sub-segments, as you can see on the slide here. Are there particular segments that, Jamie, you are actually focusing on specifically? Is it catalogs, advertising, or are you going pretty much for anything that you view as possible to do with your equipment and your services?
Yeah, for PDI, we've had really good growth in both direct mail and POP, POS, those two areas. I mean, at the core base of our business, we are a general commercial printing company, but the add-ons that we did with large format print, for example, or digital, the new digital presses that we bought to be able to print direct mail, we've seen that as more of an opportunity for us in terms of getting more out of a customer. For example, when you look at those two segments, it's not just printing. There's a supply chain that's usually invoked there, where for direct mail you would have mailing, for example. You'd have to move material all over the country, provide all kinds of compliance or regulatory data back to the customer in order to ensure that the mailing was actually successful. And then POP, well, you're talking about a game of distribution, which is a little different than general commercial printing. All of a sudden, you're not shipping a box of pamphlets, you're shipping a crate with a sign in it, or a piece of coroplast or banners, stuff that's not easy to move. So from our perspective, those two areas have been growth areas for us. A lot of the same customers that we would see on the general commercial side. But to my point earlier, it's more a question of us wrapping ourselves around that customer and providing more services. So yeah, those two categories for us would be those that were certainly have been the kindest to us, if you like, in the last couple of years.
Okay, that makes sense. Christine, that's a question that I'd like to have a chat with you about. I know that we both are fairly active in the digital embellishment place, which basically aims to add value after the print itself, so CMYK+. How successful have you been in this field, and what have you seen in terms of profitability that helped you to be successful?
Well, I don't think there's any disputing the fact that most print today is, enhanced in some way. I mean, my client base for sure. And I agree with that statement. You always have to be adding on to your technology. We just recently got our own die cutter on the floor because we're doing a lot of small run packaging prototypes. But rarely does a piece go out of our shop that isn't either foiled or varnished, or the metallic inks off the iridescent or white ink off the iridescent. I mean, very rarely does a piece go out that's not embellished, and the price point is triple oftentimes. So you can either sell a piece of paper with ink on it or a piece of paper with foil and varnish that's worth 3 times the amount. But more importantly, I find with the enhancement that if I get a client that I've worked with for a while and I've done their annual reports, for instance, chances are they're not going to go anywhere else because they know I can provide them what they want. But a new area for us is actually the prototyping. So we're doing prototyping for a large manufacturer now that's doing their next year now, packaging for next year, and they just want one-off samples, very intricate, lots of foil, lots of varnish, but they're perfect. And now we have our little Duplo die cutter, so we can do samples in a second. So that's kind of how we're doing it. But I just don't understand how you can be a printer without some kind of embellishment these days. I don't know. I mean, because everybody that comes to me wants a business card that has a wow factor. And, business cards are still really critical, and print's really critical. My paper guy came in the other day and he said, if it isn't print, it's not real. And I think that's becoming more true, because what is real today, right? But if you can touch something and feel it and tactile, then I think it has value that kind of is, priceless, really.
I mean, you mentioned the word packaging. It seems to me that a lot of commercial print companies have or are actively trying to get into the packaging segment because that has a fairly steady and solid growth pattern. I mean, Jamie, have you done much in packaging? Is that a market you focus on?
Yeah, we have the equipment that is required to do packaging. The challenge for us has always been, and don't get me wrong, we do a lot of packaging, but when you get to a certain size, the trouble we have competing with some of the bigger guys that are vertically integrated in terms of the paper supply and the rest of the process, they have such an advantage over us where we can play in a small space, but we really can't get to the next level unless we were to get a lot bigger, a lot faster. The paper, the raw material portion of that whole packaging game is a very interesting play, but we've had success, and we continue to have success there. Actually, through COVID, probably one of the most reliable sources of revenues we had was packaging, because it was exploding. Right, everybody needed more boxes for frozen food and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we do a lot of it. It's something that we've been doing for quite some time.
I noticed that you not too long ago invested in some interesting large format equipment, including a textile machine. How is that going for you?
So that's unfortunate. COVID wasn't kind to the retail market. So, but yeah, so in December of 2018, we totally revamped our shop. We bought all new large format equipment, flatbeds, roll-to-roll devices, and a Reggiani machine, which is a textile printing machine for dye sublimation. And things were moving along quite well, and we're very happy to have gotten that equipment. Our business grew exponentially. It was quite, we still couldn't believe how much success we've had. But when COVID hit and the retail stores closed, that part of our business was the hardest hit. So a little bit to Christine's point before, we reinvented our large format shop to produce PPE material for COVID. So plexiglass screens, directional signage, all kinds of paraphernalia used to protect oneself against the virus, and we were successful with that. But now the reality is as stores start to reopen, many of these retailers have been faced with economic hardships that have made it such that they're either under protection for bankruptcy and or headed that route, and the spend is down tremendously. So a lot of that equipment is not being used to its full capacity.
Richard, how have you been handling this from the West Coast perspective? Large format a big market for you? I know you've done some recent investments.
Yeah, so on the wide format side, you know, this theme of diversification, we've been working to diversify our business, which was sort of, you know, 95% offset, commercial offset, you know, just maybe say 10 years ago or so, is now somewhere in the sort of 75% range. And that wide format, getting into the wide format space is part of that. We've seen sort of, when we invested in some equipment about 6 years ago, sort of steady year-over-year growth, because we already have a lot of relationships in the market, and now being able to offer that, that was sort of a steady growth. And then we recently acquired a business that's dedicated to wide format, and we've launched that service at the beginning of this month. So it's still very new. But it's sort of a significant expansion in capability. And it really just sort of is an overall part of the overall strategy to diversify and to kind of spread our reach wider, because we sort of adopted this philosophy that the, you know, offset printing or core commercial printing is the heart of the business, and, you know, where we built our success, and we don't see that changing. But our ability to secure that kind of business is increased by our ability to offer other things. So because many companies are looking for, if they have a good relationship, a high level of trust, they're going to want to buy a range of services from that vendor. And so we're, you know, positioning ourselves, or working hard to position ourselves as a kind of single source, you know, true single source vendor, where we're producing it all within our organization. And that expands into the fulfillment side as well. We have a dedicated business for warehousing and pick and pack, fulfillment, as well as mailing. So that's all part of the same facility. So we have sort of 3 pillars of our service now: wide format, the mail fulfillment side, and then the core printing service, which is digital, like indigo printing and commercial print. So that's sort of, you know, how we're doing it. We don't have any really major area of specialization in terms of how the clients we're serving. We are sort of falling to as times have gotten tougher, we want to be more for our clients. So instead of saying we're a packaging printer or we're this kind of printer, we are, you know, really trying to, and maybe that's also reflective of the market we're operating in. We're trying to be, you know, be able to do a lot of different things. Our investment in perfect binding, which is no small undertaking, you know, not just the scale of the equipment in terms of the cost and shifting it and all that stuff, but also the size of the equipment. The perfect binder we bought is quite large. So we jumped in a few years ago, and that has definitely been a huge impact for us, because we've really positioned ourselves as a printing company that can competitively produce a high quality level perfect bound products. And we're seeing an increase, a growth in that. We service the local market, West Coast, or, you know, into Western Canada, and also throughout the US, and the demand for sort of high quality, perfect bound work. We're seeing a lot of doors opening for us. And I think this speaks to that point earlier around print has a unique position, not just for, you know, publishers or for people that, you know, want their content out there, but they're also for companies who are trying to profile their products. If they want to position it in a high-end way, they often use print to do that. And kind of a book format or a small book format is a nice way to do that. So we see a lot of different applications in that technology, and it might be declining in some areas, but it's also increasing in other areas, particularly short run, very specialized types of products.
You mentioned fulfillment as one of the areas of your growth. Is Canada's geography helping you there, meaning distances are being so large? Are you sort of regionally oriented, and you compete much with, for example, printing companies in Eastern Canada?
I would say the fulfillment growth we've had is pick and pack distribution for Western Canada. That would be like the Canadian client, the Canadian client. but we also have 2 sales offices in the US. And because of our reputation as a high quality print provider, being able to attach distribution to that print service has made us more competitive and being able to offer, you know, a deeper service to a US client. So the distribution side, growing in both markets for us, but the kind of ship on demand, largely tied to e-commerce for US clients is very attractive because we're able to drop into directly into USPS, you know, distribution channels next day or same day, just like a US competitor can. So our proximity to the border, which is, you know, many Canadian cities, gives us you know, speed to market and all that. So yeah, so it's probably more continent wide on the US side and more regional on the Canadian side.
I see. Okay. I'm going to swap to some of the products, and I just put up a slide. There's some really interesting print works. I know that, Christine, you did a few of those. How much of an advantage is it for you to offer something just regionally versus nationally, or do you even operate nationally, Christine?
Well, actually, I would say 80% of our business is US based.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Trying to develop the local market more. That's a big growth area for us, but 70 to 80% of what we do is US based, and I'm very fortunate for that. Also, we have the Canadian dollar, US dollar, which, you know, I'm very happy when the Canadian dollar is not doing well and the American dollar is, but it's an advantage because, you know, there was almost 30 points there that you could play with, so you could certainly go in competitively when you quoted something. But I think that having the embellishment end of it certainly does help me get into some of those markets, but I think it's also the creativity part of it, because I will go, I will present something that is designed and ready to go and entice them to take on the project with me. So I do probably get my work in a different fashion than a lot of large printers. I think it's really interesting that I think it was Jamie mentioned the sales force is so important, and I think it is too, for sure. But anyway, having said that, I had recently done a partnership with Print3 across Canada. And of course, that happened just as a pandemic hit too, because their shops just don't have the kind of embellishment capabilities we do. So we were going to sort of do a cross Canada tour and, you know, teach them how to sell metallic inks, how to sell foils and varnishes, and how to up their game a little. But that got sort of put on hold. But that is a potential growth for me, you know, hopefully when COVID settles down a bit and I can get on an airplane again. But yeah, I think the embellishment definitely opens doors and it keeps the door open, really. But it's all about relationships. I think, you know, my largest account is, like I said, US based, and that is simply a relationship that I've worked on for 8 years. So I think you just try to get a really solid relationship and build your business from it. And, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket, which is hard to balance sometimes, but, you know, by doing the Print3 Alliance, as well as trying to get more local business on board, we're trying to get that more 50-50 split.
Do you lead with enhanced products in the sales pitch, even if it's not asked for, or is that something that you will use sparsely? How do you try to open new accounts?
Well, I mean, I guess I don't go after accounts that wouldn't buy it. I mean, you know, I don't want to do flyers. So I kind of niche marketed myself. Maybe, you know, sometimes that's the shortfall. I don't know. But, you know, I mean, I don't really want to do commodity prints. So I'm not going to go after it per se. I'll go after the high-end print. I'm known for high-end print. I'm known for, you know, a lot of handwork. When we do a project, I work with other materials like metals and different things when we're doing presentations. I've got a real niche market for RFPs for big companies. So I don't think anybody would really gravitate towards me unless they wanted something unusual made out of something unusual. And I was really getting involved in the convention side of things. And I had done an amazing booth for Drupa, but that will never see the light of day. But
well, I wouldn't be so sure now. Mr. Lander announcing that he loves Drupa. He may have just saved Drupa.
Well, I hope I hope it sees the light of day because it was quite a fun booth to work on. But I think that, I think embellishment today, when people come out of this pandemic, and we will survive and move forward. I think how you position your brand and how you reach your client, whether they're a new client or existing client, is going to matter a lot. And people are going to want that touch, because we're so touchless at the moment. They're going to want a touch point, and print's going to be that touch point. And I think it's going to get stronger. And like I said before, it's real, it's trusted, all that stuff that we've gone on about forever. But coming out of this, if you can survive this and you're still standing, I think you're in a really good position. But will people just want a plain old business card? I don't think so. I think people are going to want to come out of this strong and say, like, wow, look at, I've restructured my brand. I've reinvented my brand. I've refreshed my brand. I'm better. I'm stronger. And, luxury brands will probably rise to the top. And, those are the kind of brands that are going to want embellishment. They're not going to want print on paper. They're going to want that extra creative spark. And, I think creativity is going to get us through this. And when you think of really hard times, creativity is strongest in those times, right? I mean, I was listening to a fashion designer on the TV the other day, and, she said, like, my best creative moments have come from, the hardest times. And she believes that fashion's going to have, that's a billion-dollar industry too. And she feels that it's going to come out stronger because, people are going to focus so much on the quality and on the creativity. And that's what embellishment's all about, the quality and creativity.
I saw on your website that you do something what you call binders galore. Tell me a little bit about that, or tell us about that.
Well, that's sort of how I started. I was involved with a company in the UK that did custom binders, and they had a material called Promolite. And basically it's an aluminum with a polypropylene core, so you can hinge it and make anything out of it, really. I kind of started working with that material a lot and repping them, and started getting known for doing short run binders, like 100 binders. But I used only eco-friendly materials, recyclable materials, and a lot of polypropylene before polypropylene even became, a thing in North America. We're going back quite a few years now. And I used to get my poly from a company called Priplac in France. It was like the most beautiful poly. And that's kind of how I got my in the industry. I was always in the industry, but more on the creative side. And I would do these beautiful binders. And then obviously people would say, well, can you print the inside as well? And that's how Print Panther was kind of born from Binders Galore. But now Print Panther's taken over, and I still do my specialty binders, but the print side is now much larger than the binder side. But I can still do binders. For instance, I do an aluminum spine out of the Promolite, and then on my large format, I can print on acrylic, on Perspex, and I can do beautiful covers and then rivet it to my spines. So we use our large format machine in a very unusual way. I don't think most printers use their large format like we do. It just gives us great coverage on thicker materials.
What's the group's view on partnerships and mergers? I mean, there's a lot of discussion in the UK about this. There have been some recent big news in response to rapid growth of one particular company here. It's called Blue Tree in the UK.
Was that directed to me?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Who were you directing that question to?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was asking Jamie, actually.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. You cut out there. I don't
Yeah.
know what happened with the connection, but I think the whole concept. Our industry is forever in consolidation, it seems. So, we've done quite a few partnerships. We've been very successful. We've been fortunate with them. I think there's nothing like working with a partner together to tackle the hurdle of learning how to do something different. I just find it's a much more welcome way to get into a new business as opposed to, purely buying someone out, whether it's geography or a product. I really like the idea of the partnership, and PDI has several in the distribution business and some of our large format and some of our mailing business as well. So it's been a really great way for us to access new things, whether it's market or products, through a partnership with someone that you enjoy working with. Plus, from there comes the added benefit of learning about best practices and a knowledge base, acquiring a knowledge base you didn't have before. So I really like the idea, the concept, and for us, as I mentioned, it's been successful.
And geography in your particular case has also been helpful, or and language?
Absolutely.
Or not?
Absolutely. I mean, we are in the West because we've partnered with a company from the West. Otherwise, it would have been too difficult. And it's not impossible to do, but you know, if you have a relationship that's already close to the values that you have within your own business, if you think about how easy it is to enter that market with Big Brother standing beside you, it just makes a lot more sense.
Well, I think geography does matter a lot in Canada. I mean, if you fly from London to Montreal, it takes you probably as long as it takes you to fly from Montreal to Vancouver. Yeah. And that is just fact. So you have to deal with geography as it presents itself. Canada is a very, very large country.
Yeah, absolutely. And our customers, I've taken us, you know, across Canada, as they grow, they require additional services. They need a bigger footprint for the services that we provide, and we're only too happy to bring them there. Mm-hmm. So it's worked out.
Makes sense. Richard, how much do you use technology to lead you into new markets? I'm thinking of technology like LED UV, for example, or even 3D printing or augmented reality. Are those things that you are looking at to grow your market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's traditionally the tool we've always used in terms of new value add to the market, and we still do that. It's still a major part of how we present our company. And you know, generally every year we're going to have some new technological offering, or multiple times per year. And our latest focus has been last year the addition of the LED UV. So that's an XL106 Perfector that we installed, 8 color. So it's sort of it's presented not just from its quality, but also from its efficiency. Now, how do you translate that to a value for a client? Not as straightforward as a new finish or like a new UV treatment or something like that. But it is resonant with the client that we can turn a job around within a very short time frame because of the drying time and our ability to jump on the folder. So that takes a little bit of creative explanation. But the other piece there too is that when you announce a new equipment installation, you're also presenting to the market that the company continues to advance. And I think part of it too is it's also during difficult economic times, it's also just as important to talk about new things because generally businesses go a little quieter because they're essentially struggling to, keep afloat or they're facing more internal challenges. But I think that extra effort needs to be there to talk about new things, new offerings, even during times like this. So for us, for sure, technology has been continues to be a major part of the offering. We also, at the same time, like right now, there's a lot of focus on sustainability. So the way we do that is we work with, say, paper mills to offer specific products that have very high environmental attributes. So it's not just, how something's finished or the treatments you can apply or those types of things. That's obviously a huge part of it as well. But you can also find other creative ways to add value, sustainability being one of them. Online tools, dashboards for your clients, or those kinds of things. In terms of the augmented reality, we've played with that technology, but it hasn't been a big focus for us. We do have an active project right now that is focused on developing workflows that allow automation from a mobile device. So being able to print from someone's phone and being able to get it straight to a printing press without really a lot of intervention. So taking steps out of the process that would allow people to access our services very, very easily is another sort of way to, to bring value. So those are all sort of all things that can come together to demonstrate the company as a progressive supplier.
Okay. Christine, any playing around, testing, working with augmented reality or even 3D printing?
I got involved with that a couple of years back with another company, and it had a little bit of a blip that I enjoyed working with it. We did a few Christmas cards, but I don't find it a real. It's not being asked for a lot in my marketplace and in the space that I work with my clients. I think it's intriguing. I think there's certainly room for growth with it, but it takes another device to do it, and I don't know. I'm kind of trying to just focus, on the printed. A printed piece at the moment, and I don't know. I don't want to download an app to get to this or get to that, and I'm fighting it a little. I think it's interesting because I was thinking as we were talking about all that, the whole social media thing too. I'm fighting that a little. I know I have to get back in because you have to be there, but I think there's a time where you have to just step back and kind of analyze. And I don't know if augmented reality is. I don't know. I just don't feel for it.
Did you have any use for this? Did you work with that, or did you look into it?
We looked at it a little bit like Christine. Our customers, although they were impressed, by what that technology can do, and that the application itself is really hard to fit within our customer base. We played around with it. We invested in some software at one point. We really, tried to make a go of it, but the demand, demand was not really there. The other thing is people don't know how to use it or what to use it for. So it became difficult for us to adopt it as a growth or as a focus for us in terms of our approach. We did a lot of work with QR codes and personal our URLs and all that kind of stuff. But when we hit augmented reality, it kind of hit a zone where everyone loves to see it and they think it's all cool, but hard to sell from our perspective.
I think we all got familiar with this, the wine labels where you had to download an app and then scan and it would give you the background story. It was very nice. It was exciting, but I'm not sure how you can sell it if you have to ask for more money. And in the end, this is what it really is. If you want to make print more exciting, you would have to offer something, but you have to get something in return. Technology doesn't come for free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Richard, ideas about, there's a lot of talk about subscription models in the industry. Is there an idea about talking subscription models for print? Not just for equipment itself, but, would that make even sense?
Like as in to sell a subscription model to a customer?
Yes, absolutely. Not a per job basis, but a volume-based basis. Would that?
Yeah, I think that model has existed in the past where you sort of guarantee pricing on the basis of an anticipated volume, and you don't necessarily fluctuate your price based on the size of the order. You sort of lock into a contract and say, we'll provide this particular product at this flat unit price, and sometimes we'll do, a large quantity, sometimes we'll do a small quantity based on your demand. That's probably common, I'm guessing, because we're not heavy into packaging, but I would imagine packaging models might be built like that, where you assure a fixed unit cost. So to a degree, that could be interpreted as a subscription-based, where it's volume-based or partner-based. But no, we haven't really thought about that. We're still sort of kind of trying to wrap our heads around the subscription model on the equipment side. For a company like Heidelberg to sell equipment as a subscription, based on anticipated volumes, it's interesting, and it's certainly maybe the way of the future. But that's probably where our attention is right now, is understanding exactly how that would work, as opposed to thinking about how to sell a subscription model to our client. Not really in the equation for us at this point.
I was just thinking in terms of the profile of the customers. The age profile is changing, and it's a different generation are now involved in buying print, and they seem to be less interested in owning products, goods, or services, but rather renting them in the form of a subscription.
Yeah, I don't know whether that would apply because our products generally would have an end of life, and the end of life is a recycling of that product. So I understand. Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought about it a whole lot, but it's certainly that whole idea of a product being used for a period of time and then essentially given back to the producer. I think that idea has been discussed from sustainability point of view. That's extended producer responsibility idea, which has been floated around in Canada, where the producers of products have to pay for its disposal. But that's not really a subscription. That's more of a sort of a closed loop. Yeah, circular economy concept. Yeah.
Jamie, you're no take-ups for that. Did you ever experience that?
No, not for the subscription model and the way you described it, Christian. I haven't seen it, but I would argue that an RFP is probably along those same lines, right? I mean, this whole concept of leveraging volumes of work under predetermined conditions and specifications. It's a great theory and makes a lot of sense in terms of what we could do to optimize print, but the reality is that these things never seem to materialize because needs change so quickly, and our customers have to adapt to what's going on around them. So more often than not, what you did for them last week, next week they want something totally different. So it's a challenge, and I get the volume part of it, but I have trouble. I would have trouble, I guess, understanding how we could make it work on a sustainable basis.
So how do you then interact with your changing customer profile? I mean, they're getting younger, they have different views, they look
well,
for
so,
different
in our case, much like I think Richard was talking at the beginning of the conversation, our sales force is a key part of our obviously our selling initiative. And as they get older, we are faced with exactly that challenge. First of all, it's hard, especially in large organizations, it's hard to manage print spend because print is one of those things a lot of times that gets commoditized and it gets pushed to the lowest, common denominator within a sourcing or a purchasing environment. And it's difficult for some of our older guys to be able to connect on that basis because they still see the value of print and the craftsmanship and all that. And let's face it, young kids today communicate a lot more with texts and Instagram accounts than they do with a handshake or a lunch. So that curve has been dealt with. And if you were to look at the makeup of our sales group today, all of the new succession we have are young people that work a lot differently. They use a lot more electronics and tools, social media platforms, that sort of thing to communicate. And I would have to argue that perhaps the response rate they get is probably higher than the mature salespeople who are trying to develop those new accounts. It's a game that's changed so tremendously.
So that sounds to me like, Christine, you have to brush up on your social media skills and selling techniques, I guess.
Well, obviously you try to sell to your target market and know who you're speaking to. But I think young people definitely, spend a lot of time on their phones and do a lot of stuff on their phones, but they still want to touch something. They still want that touch experience. So I'm not completely in agreement with that. It's like, I don't think you can just say old people do it this way and young people do it this way. I think there's a mix. And when I said that I had stepped away from social media, I stepped away from it very thoughtfully, because I realized that what I was saying wasn't always my voice. It was, people that were around me and not my voice. And that's why I stepped away, because when I came back with my voice, I wanted it to just be mine. And I wanted it to, I just don't want it to be noise. Instagram and all those things, there's a lot of noise, but you get one beautiful direct mail piece in your mailbox and you might look at it. And I would beg to differ that the response rate is lower. I think the response rate's higher for direct mail than social media.
I think that probably is true. Is there also something, I wanted to touch base on this, is that something you got involved with because you were looking at Eat, Print, Love? I know you set that up.
Yeah, well, I did this a couple of years ago now. I can't believe it's a couple of years, but I wanted to kind of reach out to designers because I was working at that time on a project for RIT through Don Nye at Konica, and I was also working with Ryerson on a few things. And I realized I really liked kind of that teaching part of things and sharing information. So I started Eat Print Love in hopes that it would be my voice and that I could go and do a speaking at a conference or a panel like this. I love panels. Don't really like speaking on my own. I prefer a panel scenario. And I wanted Eat Print Love to be a resource that designers and printers could go to and share. So, for instance, I post all the Fold Factory templates on it. There's also a link there to download templates for boxes or other things. There's inspiration. So it was really just an inspiration website that I wanted to do apart from Print Panther. And I think it still has a lot of growth potential. I want to bring more people into it with me. So if you guys would like to join, that would be wonderful because I would love a male point of view on some of these things. But I think it's really just my love for print, and I wanted my social media to portray that and convey that and not get mixed up with, the machinery or the technology, but more just the love of print and the love of a beautiful design, because, print can only be beautiful if the design is good. So that's where Eat Print Love came about.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. That's why I wanted to mention it here. And the fact that embellishment helps to, have much higher recall figures and attention to the printed product is much higher, is a much better scenario.
And it's more sustainable because if you're reading a large document on your computer and you have to pull it up a couple of times, you're using way more energy than if you had a printed piece from a sustainable tree that you recycled properly. Way, way less environmental impact than reading a huge document on the screen.
Well, I think that probably time to sum up what it actually takes to be successful in print, certainly from a Canadian view. I'll try and start and summarize it with what it takes. I guess whatever it takes to do, commercial printers will do to be successful. You go into PPEs, you go into partnerships, you offer new technologies, you offer tactile printing, you offer all different solutions, fulfillment centers. Anything that's particularly Canadian about this other than geography, or is it rules, sessions that everybody can learn from and everybody can apply? Richard, your closing thoughts.
Yeah, in terms of the Canadian flavor to this, I think at least from our perspective and what we're seeing resonate on the West Coast is we definitely are getting a lot of traction by, first of all, I think promoting, all the things that can be done with print. So we still, we're still very focused on the craft and the power of the medium that, and the different ways it can be used and all the possibilities technologies bring. So that still has to be a huge part of it. But I think the other piece that might be Canadian and, or at least to a degree is how do we kind of look at the wider issues, the bigger problems that we're all facing. And obviously we see it day to day in our the news feed we're getting, is how do we incorporate bigger solutions into the products we provide. And that I'm speaking specifically on the sustainability front, because consumers and companies need to adapt, and they need to present to be participants, and consumers are going to increasingly demand that businesses play an active, not a bystander role, but an active role in helping solve these wider issues. So I think maybe that's something that Canadian companies are potentially going to set an example and say, you know what, we don't need to shy away from the issue of deforestation, biodiversity loss, climate change issues, even social justice issues, all that stuff that we're seeing. Can we play a role in sort of being business leaders, but also adapting our service to these wider issues? And I think we're trying to do that in our service. So go beyond, we're FSC certified or we're doing this so we feel good about it, is take it further and be much more active participants. And I have no doubt that actually builds loyalty It attracts new customers. It drives growth. It helps us grow beyond our borders because we're also seen as a company that's trying to set an example. So yeah, I think that might be a Canadian flavor, hopefully, that is also seen as a success in other places.
Christine, have you got what would you like to add to that?
Well, I think that's a really good way of saying it, but I think it's also thinking more globally. Like, I think more than ever, we all realize now we're so attached. I mean, it's a global way of thinking, and so it's a Canadian perspective. But I think, I think I'm more looking at the whole global thing now, and how can we help each other on a way bigger scale. And sustainability, it's great and it's important, and we're all there for it, and climate change and all that. But if we're not all there together, it's really hard to fight that fight. So I think if we can lead with, just taking care of each other and staying safe, getting through this and coming out the other side stronger and better, and our industry is going to thrive and it's going to survive.
Jamie, we started with you on the East Coast, and it looks like we're going to finish with you on the East Coast.
That's okay. Well, I agree with both Christine and Richard. The problem I see, or not the problem, but the challenge I see with sustainability in our industry is the compliance part of it. There is no governing body that makes it such that everybody has to follow the rules. And I guess it's difficult for those companies that invest in sustainability to make a difference, to sometimes compete. And I mean that in the sense that when it comes down to dollars and cents, if there's no difference in cost, it's not a problem. But when there's a difference in cost, it becomes an issue. Other than that, in Canada, I think the way our industry works, we are big on being friendly with each other in terms of our sharing of information and our alliances that we build and the knowledge power and all that. And, let's not forget that we're not the US here. So in Canada, a commercial printer has got to do a lot. We don't have big pockets of market that we can just, aim and focus on one product and survive on it. We tend to be very flexible and very diverse in what we have to offer because the pool of business we're dealing with is so much smaller. But yeah.
Well, I'll say thank you very much, Christine. Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Jamie, for joining us this morning and for discussing this. I guess the answer is, what does it take? Well, whatever we can do. And with that, I guess I hand it back to Brendan. Brendan, thanks for the session.
Great. Well, thank you one and all for what was a really informative, insightful, and actually inspirational session. Here in the UK, my day job is looking after commercial printers and ensuring that I can help their businesses grow. And I certainly think this perspective from the Canadian market and what you are going through and how you're meeting these challenges will be, give them a lot of really new ideas, ways and strategies that you've been dealing with this. A lot of things that, especially you get sort of sucked into the day-to-day and everyone dealing with the same problems in the same way. I think there were actually a lot of fresh ideas of how you're doing things in the Canadian market that can be adopted by your UK and European cousins. So otherwise, thank you very much. I hope everyone joins us for the next session for Commercial Print Day at Future Print Summit.